Just going to kind of warm up a little bit with the Hine Matov and then have a really, really special piece of music to share as kind of an official opening. So we'll just get going with the Hine Matov. Hine Matov Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Manayim 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 Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov, Hine Matov, Yai la 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 la. Hine Matov, Hine Matov, Yai la 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 la. Hine Matov Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Truly, like brothers and sisters, a big family, we're gathered here for a wonderful presentation. And Rabbi Jill Jacobs, it's an honor to share this moment and have your teaching presented to our community. And if it's okay with our Tikkun Olam committee, maybe I'll start with an opening song. Okay, great. This is, and we have the spotlight going. This is great. And I do see we are recording. So here we go, world. It's time to repair with Tikkun Olam. This is a composition by a wonderful Jewish songwriter called Ilana Arian, who is in New York City. And we sing a fair amount of Ilana's wonderful pieces of music. And this one will be a premiere for Makom Solel Lakeside. This is called I Have a Voice. There's a call and response element to this song, which should be easy to catch on. And when we can be all together in person, then we will all, be able to enjoy singing these parts together. But let's just kind of get into the spirit. This song has a beautiful message about how we can all lend our voices to help change the world. Goes like this. I will open my eyes, I will open my eyes, I will not look away, I will not look away. I will use this gift I've been given every day. Here's the chorus. I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful, my voice can change the world. Here's another little add-on, change the world. So now you hear the chorus. We'll get back into the next verse. I will give of myself. I will give of myself. I will give of myself. I will reach out my hands. I will reach out my hands. I will use this heart that I've been given to take a stand. I have a voice. I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have My voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Next part is a blessing in Hebrew about how we are all created in the image of God. Goes like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asanu b'tselem Elohim. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. I have a voice, my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world. I will fight for truth. I'll stand up for what's right. And we will use this strength that we've been given to be alive. This is our voice is powerful. Our voice can change the world. This is our voice is powerful. Our voice can change the world. This is our voice is powerful. Our voice can change the world. This is my voice is powerful. My voice can change the world. Change the world.
Welcome to Macomb Solar Lakeside. Thank you, Cantor J. That was beautiful. It's going to lift our program even higher. We are recording and we will have a chance at the end for questions and answer. And without any further ado, I want to introduce Diane Zidman, who is the co-chair of our Tikkun Olam committee.
Good evening, everyone. As Vanessa said, I am Diane Zidman, co-chair of Tikkun Olam, along with Wendy Rhodes. I'd like to welcome everyone from Macomb Solar Lakeside, as well as all of our guests tonight, to the first in our three-part series, Building a Just Society. A big thank you to our clergy, Rabbi Jill Jacobs, and my co-programming co-chairs, Amy Platnick and Rich Amon. I'd also like to tell you now, as I officially close my welcoming remarks, and also thank you, Cantor J, for a beautiful opening. We are going to post a little poll in our chat right now, and we would like you to click on it and follow the instructions on it. You'll also see that there's a place for question and answer within that. So as soon as we're done with that, and we will see the poll results, we're going to have Rabbi Ike Serrata come on to take it away. So if you can click on the poll.
You got to put up the poll again, Diane. It disappeared.
Okay, Rich, you got the poll up? Should be in the there should be a link in the chat. Does everyone see it? Rich, is it working? Okay, I think Ike, maybe you can take it away while we're waiting.
It looks like it's working on my screen, actually. So
Okay.
Mine went up too.
Okay, it should be posting.
It's working, but somebody would have to share their screen so you could see it. And
Yeah.
so
Okay, here we
Mine's
go.
not working.
Is it a Zoom poll?
It's in the
No.
chat.
Oh, I see. Okay. Over here.
Ah,
Well,
yeah.
maybe you'll be able to track that down and get it up there in a little bit so that people can see what we've done. But it was starting to make a very nice Wordle, what I could see of a lot of beautiful ideas that people have about what we need to do to make this world better. So I wanted to start with just a moment about the Torah portion. I mean, this week we begin the third book of Torah. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Vanessa, was that you?
Yes, it is.
Right? Thanks. So just
Did you want me to take it down?
I just let people absorb it for a minute.
Okay.
So you can see it. So the larger words, of course, mean that more people put those words in. So you can see what some of the folks on our call are thinking about. What we certainly a nice list of things that we need to work on. So perhaps now, Vanessa, if you're ready, you can take it down. So as I was saying, we started the third book of the Torah this week, the book of Vayikra, the laws of sacrifice. And of course, we don't do sacrifice quite the way our ancestors did it in the ancient temple. We don't bring animals or grain or any of those things to the temple in Jerusalem. But I think sometimes sacrifice gets kind of a bad name, and that we ought to think about it a little differently, because sacrifice shouldn't be a hardship. Sacrifice is an honor. Sacrifice to our ancestors was even a joy. To be able to put in the time, the effort, even the money, the blood, whatever it takes, is not a weight on our shoulders, but it's a way to lift the weight off the shoulders of others. We all know how good it feels to do good. This is the sacrifice God still wants from us, to share our bread with the hungry, to clothe and house the needy, to bring justice to an unjust society. Doing that is the best kind of sacrifice. It lifts others, it lifts us too. Now it's my honor to introduce our speaker tonight, Rabbi Jill Jacobs, who is the executive director of Truah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights. And she is one of my teachers, and I am just delighted that she is here tonight. She has over the years been on Newsweek's list of most influential rabbis, on the Forward's list of influential Jews. She's the author of two terrific books, Where Justice Dwells, a hands-on guide to doing social justice, and a second book, There Shall Be No Needy, Pursuing Social Justice Through Jewish Law and Tradition. I believe both of them are in print and available, so I encourage you, they're terrific. They're both on my shelf and they belong on anybody's shelf. Before Truah, Jill was the rabbi in residence for Jewish Fund for Justice. And some of you may actually remember her from a while back when she was here in Chicago as the director of outreach and education at JCUA, the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs. And in that role, she actually spoke at our Legacy Lakeside congregation at a Sunday morning adult enrichment. I'm not sure how many years ago, but it's wonderful to have you back, and it's my honor to turn the screen over to you. Thank you very much for being here, Rabbi Jacobs.
Thank you so much to you, to Rabbi Srada, and to everybody who put together this evening. It's really been wonderful to plan with the team and to hear more about the work that you're doing. So I want to do a couple of things today. So the request was that I guess some of you had seen a document that Truah put out that is our vision for recreating the world anew post-pandemic in, God willing, a new and hopefully better era. So I was asked to share some of that and to speak a little bit about that. As you'll see, that document covers a lot of issues, and any one of them could take a whole day to talk about. So we're going to kind of skim over the surface a little bit. So we'll take some time looking at that. we'll take some time with some texts that I'll tell you about in a moment. And also, I know that some people are very familiar with Teruah, and others, perhaps this is an introduction, so I'll give a little bit of an introduction along the way. So as you'll see, the vision for the world that Teruah put out is based on the Mishkan, on the tabernacle that the Jews, that Bnei Israel, that the Israelites built in the desert on their way out of Egypt. And it's actually a really, really appropriate time to be talking about this because, first of all, we just finished, as you heard, we just finished the book of Exodus last Shabbat, so we're starting Leviticus now. So maybe it would have been better to talk about this a few days ago, but I think it's still timely. We still get a week to hold on to the Torah portion. Okay, so I'm going to just start with one text about the Mishkan. And this is a text from last week's Parsha. Can you all see my screen now? Great, okay. Now, just to kind of bring you into my process. In order for me to see my screen, I can't really see all of you. So I do invite you, if you have thoughts as we go, to put them in the chat, and I will try to notice, but it's possible that I just won't notice right away because it's a little hard to read two things at once. But we will have a lot of time for conversation. Okay. Okay, you can see that okay? Hopefully. Okay, so this is where we get to at the end of the book of Shemot. Now, you might remember, if you've been paying attention over the last little while, that we actually spent a lot of time talking about the Mishkan throughout the book of Exodus. Through multiple parshiot, multiple Torah portions, we get lots and lots of description and instructions and construction, information about construction material. And then it seems like we've kind of moved on for a little while, and then we get to the last two parshiot. We read both of them, actually. It was a double portion this past Shabbat. So we get to the very end, and we go through, I'm going to spare you a lot of the detail, but we basically go through everything again and remind us all of the different materials that people donate and all of their generosity and all of the different instructions for building this Mishkan. So here we are almost at the very end. Vayhi b'chodesh harishon. This is actually also great timing because the first month, at least biblically, is a month of Nisan, which we just started this past weekend. So we are right here, right now, beginning Nisan. So in the beginning of this first month of the second year that they are out in the Midbar, in their journey through the wilderness, the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was set up. Moses set up the Mishkan, Vayakem Moshe et HaMishkan, and then we go through a whole list of all the different parts. So the sockets and the planks and the posts, et cetera, where that ellipsis is, there's many, many verses of more description that you can check out yourself. And then the tone changes a lot. So after a lot of this description, which basically sounds like, I don't know, like you're reading an IKEA instruction manual or something, then it's not just construction, because now it says that when Moshe finished the work, Vayechal Moshe et hamlacha, then what happens? Vayechas ha'anan et ohel moed, the cloud covers the ohel moed, the tent of meeting. Uchvod Hashem malei et hamishkan, and the presence of God, of the eternal, fills this Mishkan. So wow, it's like we were just in literally the nuts and bolts, and now all of a sudden somehow those nuts and bolts managed to summon God. So that's a big deal. There's a real contrast between the kind of grind of the construction and the impact, which is the impact to actually manage to summon God down to earth so powerfully that we hear elsewhere that Moshe can't even enter. Like, God is just taking up the space. It is fully, completely filled with divinity, with God's kavod. I want to point out there's a lot we can talk about here. I'm not going to go so deep in, but I want to just mention one other thing. If you look at the first and the second verses that I gave you, you can't really see the verse markers in English, but you'll get it. We are told twice about the setting up of this Mishkan. The first time it says Hukam HaMishkan, it's in the passive, that it was set up. And then we get the active, Vayakem Moshe et HaMishkan, Moshe set it up. So we have both the sense that the Mishkan is somehow magically set up. It comes up on its own, that there's some sort of a divine force there, and also that human beings do it, that Moshe and of course all the other people who are involved in building it. And so here we see already the sense of a divine human partnership, that God needs the people to stick in the sockets and the planks and the bars and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But without God, we couldn't get to this moment where poof, the Mishkan is there and then the divine presence is there. So it really exemplifies this human divine partnership to build this structure, except it's more than a structure, of course. So what is it? The rabbis of the Midrash have some ideas, and they say, okay, v'yasita takrashim l'mishkan, you should make the planks for the Mishkan. Obviously, the most exciting pasuk, the most exciting verse in the entire Torah. Planks, it's one that you might just kind of your eyes might glaze over as you're reading. And the rabbis say, okay, well, what is that like? And they give this mashal, this parable. They say it's like a king. Very often there's parables where God is the king and we are the servants. That's what's coming. So this is like a king who had a beautiful portrait of himself, presumably. He said to his servant, make me one like it. And his servant said, well, my master, how can I make another like it? Like, it's so amazing. It's so perfect. I can't replicate that. And the king says to him, you will paint it with your paints and I will appear in my glory. In other words, you make your version and then I will be here personally. They kind of forgot about the painting part. Like, it's almost as if the king is actually saying, paint a picture of me. But sometimes they kind of elide the details. So you do your best and that will be good enough. You do it in your medium that you use. And similarly, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessed One, said to Moses, see and make it. Okay, so what is God pointing at? God is pointing at the world. And Moshe says, what are you talking about? I can't make that, right? That's Maseh Breshit, the work of creation. I can't make that. And God says, well, you do it your way. You do it in blue and purple and crimson. You do it with just everyday human materials, but you make it as a replica of what's above. And God says, if you make below a version of what's above, then I'm going to leave above and I'm going to make my presence known below. And then it goes on, like somehow the acacia wood is parallel to the seraphim above, and also the stars above are like the clasps, the golden clasps. This idea that we're standing below and we can see the stars up above, and the same way God can see our stars that we make out of these golden clasps down below. So there's this idea throughout, this is just one example, but there is this idea throughout Jewish text that the Mishkan is a microcosm of the world, that this is the human creation that is parallel to Maseh Breshit, parallel to God's creation, and that's why that it actually summons God to come down, as it were, and to bring God's kavod, God's presence and glory into the human abode. So, okay, so what did this look like? This is one drawing. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but here's just, here's one version of what it might look like based on the biblical description. You can see there's the table and the altar and the outer court and the inner court, and you can kind of see a sense. It's pretty complex building. Okay, so throughout, when we were thinking about the world that we want to create after, God willing, soon, after the pandemic, we realized that, as many people did, that we don't want to go back to the world we had. The world we had was full of human rights abuses. It was full of people who were working jobs through which they couldn't afford to buy basic needs for their families. Still is. I'm saying was because I want to move forward. Full of people who are not able to live up to the dignity that is owed to human beings. It's not a world we want to go back to. And we have seen this so clearly in the pandemic, which is not only a public health crisis, but also a human rights crisis. Because of course, it didn't hit all of us in the same way. For some people, it's for all of us, it's been scary. I'm guessing that many of us have lost people or have experienced sickness ourselves or worried about other people. I don't want to minimize that. And it's also clear that it's very different for people who are able to work from home, as I am. And I don't know, I don't want to presume about people on this call, but certainly for me, I've been able to work from home safely. Other people are in meatpacking factories. And all of the human right, or delivering food, or all sorts of other jobs where you're exposed. And so it's been clear that this is not a pandemic that hit everybody equally. And so in thinking about what kind of world we wanted to create, of course, we looked at the Mishkan and as a microcosm of the world. So let me just pause and say a word about Trua. Trua, as you may know, is an organization that mobilizes more than 2,000 rabbis and cantors, including your own, of course, along with their communities, to work on human rights, both here at home in the United States and Canada, we're binational, and also in Israel and the occupied territories. And we do that work by organizing around specific campaigns. We're focused very much on immigration, on incarceration, and on worker justice. As well, in Israel, we consider ourselves pro-Israel, anti-occupation, and we're working for the human rights of both Israelis and Palestinians. And so we organize around specific campaigns. We train rabbis and rabbinical students to be the moral leaders that we need. And we also amplify the voices of rabbis and cantors as moral leaders, because of course we need moral leadership in this moment, probably more than ever. We need the deep wisdom of Jewish text. And so we created this vision that I'm gonna this is our quick description, and also where you can get to our website and see more. You can see here's a kind of Pesach useful. If you go to our website right now, this is what you'll see on the front. There's a Haggadah that you can download, a human rights Haggadah. I think this is the last day if you want to order fair trade kosher for Passover chocolate. So I very much recommend that. And our annual gala is coming up, and you'll see a project that we did around Jewish ethics during COVID. So I'm just going to look at the chat for 1 second. Okay, great. Thank you for posting that. Okay, so you can look at our website and see this all in more depth, but I just want to, this is really just a little bit of a taste of how we think about the world that we want to create. And I want to put this out here. I know that you're thinking about your bigger social justice plans and you're thinking about lots of issues. So this is kind of like headlines, not in depth at all. So we're thinking about one of the, there we go. One of the aspects we saw of the Mishkan is that it's a door that's open, and open doors, open gates certainly in the Bible, even in later rabbinic law, are places where there's a lot of I don't want to say traffic, but it's a place where two worlds can meet. So both certainly the gates of the Mishkan is where God shows up, so we can meet the divine there. The gates of a city are the place where you meet travelers, and they're also the places where the judges, the elders would sit to judge cases or to make determinations. So it was a place that people could come. And sometimes in our world, we think about doors as things that you shut. And that's certainly what's been the case over the last 4 years, especially when we think about immigration, that the doors of America have been shut. But instead, what if we think about doors as things that we don't shut, that we always leave ajar, that we always leave open, places that are meeting places for people who are here and people who are there. We also, as I said, the doors were the places in the ancient world where judgment would happen. And so we're also rethinking what it means to create a criminal justice system in this country, that in the United States, the criminal justice system is based on punishment. The idea is that you punish people who did something wrong. In Judaism, it's completely different. The criminal justice system is based on tshuva, the idea that everybody makes mistakes and you're not defined by the worst thing that you ever did. And so the goal of criminal justice in Judaism, in Jewish law and Jewish text, is to, first of all, protect the dignity both of the accused and the accuser, and also to offer possibilities for returning to oneself and making things better. I know I'm going through a lot very fast because I want to leave some room, some space, but again, this is all on our website. Okay, when we think about the altar, the place where we sacrifice, where we used to make sacrifices, Rabbi Sarada was talking about how we can't just skip the book of Vayikra, right? Sacrifices are still meaningful now. And something like fun little detail is the first Jewish labor strike that happened ever. Well, who knows if it happened or not. The first Jewish labor strike that is described in the Talmud takes place, is related to the altar, that there's a particular family, the Garmu family, that always makes the showbread for the altar, and they demand higher wages, and they stop working, and according to the Talmud, the priests bring in another family to make the bread, and it just, like, they just don't know how to do it, and it keeps going moldy, so they eventually have to bring back the original family and pay them more. And then they have a little argument about exactly how much more they pay them. So this holy place also represents economic justice, that we don't separate out economic justice from ritual, but actually they're all merged, that we can't have ritual that happens through injustice. And so the altar reminds us of the need for economic justice, work with dignity, making sure that everybody has fair wages, safe working conditions, and the right to unionize. We also talk a little bit here about reparations. This is also tshuva, that understanding there have been hundreds of years in which wealth was stolen from both Black and from Native Americans, and that this country has to come to terms with that and do tshuva that is translated into some kind of monetary compensation. We talk about climate change, the wash basin, the place that brings together the water, the interconnection of water. Climate change, of course, is not just an environmental crisis, it's a human rights crisis, both because in the long term, nothing else really matters if we don't have a planet, and also because it's not like there's environmentalism and then there's human rights. The people who are the most affected by climate change already are people who are living in the poorest countries, living in the poorest conditions. Climate change is already disproportionately affecting those who are more marginalized. Okay, I'm just gonna skip a little bit. You can take a look later. So here's the promise. The promise is that if we're able to build these structures of righteousness, we'll find ourselves at the parochet, the curtain in which we're able to get very, very close to the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies. And I want to go back to the text that we started with, the biblical text. If you'll remember, it's very detailed in terms of all of the individual things that we put up in the Mishkan. Like I said, it reads like construction instructions in great detail. And yet we have to take care of all of those details in order to get to this final moment when God appears. And this is something that's true both in Judaism and also in America or anywhere else. You know, Judaism, as you know, is built on a system of Halacha, which is usually translated as Jewish law, but really it's from lalechet, it's the way to walk, it's the path. And it's a whole system that describes every single aspect of our lives, from ritual law, so keeping kosher, Shabbat, Pesach, what's chametz, what's not chametz, all of the intricate details of ritual practice. And it also describes what responsibilities a worker has toward their employer and what responsibility an employer has toward a worker. It describes what a fair system of criminal justice should be in very clear detail. It talks about what the responsibilities of a landlord toward their tenant and vice versa. When are you allowed to evict people? When are you not allowed to evict people? Something that is, again, it's always very relevant, and it became especially relevant during the pandemic. How do you give tzedakah? How much do you have to give? How do you decide whether to how to distribute it? Who's deserving? Who's not deserving? What can you spend your tzedakah money on? So halacha goes into really great detail in sometimes like really painstaking arguments. Like we even joke about the Talmudic discourses, like tries out every possibility. But actually, that's where the magic happens. Because if you don't have laws, you can't just say, be nice to each other, right? That never works. You have to actually codify it into law. That you take these greater values, whether it's the value of human beings as creations in the divine image, values of equality, justice, and you actually codify into law. And that's the same in the United States or in any other country, that it's not enough to say, yes, we want this vision of a greater world, that we actually have to create just laws. And it's only through those just laws that God is actually going to come down and, God willing, and show God's presence. So I'm going to show just one last. This is like, back into this is back out of the grand scope and into the details, except I think not really. So there's a few different versions, a few different lists in the Talmud and elsewhere about what a city has to have in order for a scholar, for a Talmid Chacham to go and live there. And I think it's another way of saying, what is an honorable city? What is a dignified city? What is a city that is a place that one can live? And this particular version, which is from Rambam Maimonides, says, okay, here's the 10 things. A doctor, so you need healthcare taken care of. A craftsperson, so you need, now it's not 100% clear what this particular category, sometimes it's a craftsperson, who's doing, like an artisan, who's building whatever you need, fixing whatever you need. Sometimes it ends up getting understood as a bloodletter, like another kind of surgeon or something, but let's go with somebody who can build stuff and take care of things. So you have your physical needs taken care of. A wash house, which is really important for also for your physical needs, especially because, Rambam himself was a doctor. Hopefully he knew a few things, but, hygiene was probably the best thing you could do in terms of your own medical care, certainly in the medieval world and before that, earlier and even now, we've all been washing our hands probably more in the last year than ever before. A bathroom, so someplace that is clean to go to the bathroom. Again, this is also about both personal hygiene, but also the physical health of the community, because you don't really want sewage around. You have to have water. And then we have to take care of people's spiritual needs. So you need to have a shul, you need to have a synagogue. Other lists will say you also need to have 10 people who have no other job except to make a minyan at any moment, right? So you need to be able to provide for the spiritual needs of people. You need a teacher, you need to teach the next generation. You need somebody to collect tzedakah, because you need a scribe, so you need somebody who's able to write the text, right? We need to be able to study our ritual text to pass down both our legal and spiritual, all of our texts, our entire system of halacha. We need to collect tzedakah because we need to invest in making sure that everybody in this community has what they need economically, food, shelter, everything else. And you need a court. You need a criminal justice system, and that is able to create a way for people to be made whole, both the accused and the accusers, hopefully in a way that protects people's dignity. And so he goes into, not a lot of detail. This is just a short list, but I assure you that Jewish law has much detail about any and all of these things. And the promise, this is ahistorical, but very much out of order, but just want to leave us with this promise from Isaiah of what the perfected world should be like. I know the text is very small. I'm not going to read all of it, but you can, again, get out your Tanakh and look at it yourself. But this promise that there's going to be joy, there's not going to be any weeping. People can build houses and just hang out in them and feel comfortable that they're not going to be taken away. We can plan for the future. That's what this is really about. You can go to the trouble of building a house, knowing that you're going to get to live there, and maybe your children too, and your grandchildren. You can plant a vineyard knowing that you're still going to be there and still going to be healthy by the time the fruit grows. We're not going to be exiled so that somebody else comes in to live in our homes and to eat what we've planted. And that we're going to have a place where everybody can live in dignity, everybody can experience joy, everybody can experience a sense of stability, and that this is going to be a world that ultimately will protect both the physical needs and also the spiritual needs of everyone. So that is what, God willing, we are looking for and hope that we will all be part of building. So I'm going to end there and take comments, questions, arguments, anything.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Jacobs. I am going to kind of be moderating questions and presenting them to you and asking a few of my own. But why don't we, thank you for just a wonderful presentation. What do you, I guess this is a broader question, and I think that it's probably one that you've heard before, but in a congregation that has diverse political viewpoints, I mean, to be honest with you, we don't have too much diverse political viewpoints in our congregation. We are historically founded in many ways as quite a liberal civil rights congregation with Rabbi Arnold Jacob Wolf, but of course there is. And how do you distinguish between what is a political social justice focus versus what is really truly rooted in Jewish values? Or is there a distinction, or should we even focus on the distinction? Is it irrelevant? How do you explain when somebody says you're getting too political?
Sure. So first of all, I want to distinguish between political and partisan. So partisan is what party you're connected to. So saying, vote for this candidate or belong to this party, right? That's partisan. But political, I mean, all political means is that it has to do with living together with people. And Judaism, everything about Judaism, starting from basically the moment that, I can't say the very first verse of the Torah, but at least the 26th verse, when we get around to creating human beings, it's all about how we're supposed to live together and live together in society. And all of Halacha is asking the question, how are we supposed to build a society that is just for everybody who's here? And so when we even think about the Torah, I mean, if the Torah were a book of laws, I mean, this is a very famous question that the rabbis ask this very famous question about why didn't the Torah start with the very first command that was given to the Jewish people, which is to make the month of Nisan the first month? Again, very exciting mitzvah, right? Like set the calendar, right? It's like, but it doesn't come until the book of Exodus. So why don't we just dispense with the book of Genesis altogether? Who cares, right? Just get to the laws. But of course, that's not what the Torah is about. It's about learning how we're supposed to live together in society, which is all about politics. And I mean, our core narrative is a story of oppression and liberation. And so when we look at specific issues, pick any issue that you want to look at, worker justice, for example, we have a lot of Jewish text about it. And it's not something that people say that's actually just not true. It's people will say, well, you can just pick different texts that will give you the opposite conclusion. Like, yeah, you can, but our texts have a tendency. And so if you want to ignore that tendency and pick out a couple of things that are, that are kind of outside the norm, yeah, you can do that. But if you actually want to look at it really, then you come to a very rich conversation about how to ensure dignity and fair treatment for workers. And it's political because it's about people and how we build a just society, but it's not partisan, or at least it shouldn't be, and it doesn't have to be.
Right. Great. Thank you. Other questions? Anyone have a question I can relay to Rabbi Jacobs? Well, then I'll ask another. What do you see as particular issues that have been really highlighted or lifted up in greater focus since the pandemic? What kind of do you think are some of the imperatives right now?
Okay, so some of them I mentioned. So One is workers' rights. We saw, of course, people who are dying in meatpacking factories and in agricultural fields and delivering food who felt like they didn't have another choice. I mean, the choice, it's an impossible choice. Either you can feed your family or or you can't. And if you choose to feed your family, you might die of COVID. And this is especially true because we still are excluding non-citizen workers for the most part from relief. Um, and we're seeing as a result, I mean, we saw, unfortunately, the raising the minimum wage to $15 was not in the COVID relief bill, but we are seeing more of a movement for that. People really understanding how low our minimum wage is. We see the workers organizing at the Amazon plant in Alabama, of all places, because they've been working in dangerous conditions. And when people are desperate, sometimes they have the strength to organize in ways that they haven't. So that absolutely, I'm very much hoping that we see a wave of moving toward creating globally better conditions for workers. I mean, we saw Tra has been involved for more than 10 years, close to 10 years at least, in with an organization in the Florida tomato fields that's run by tomato workers. There's 80 to 100,000 tomato workers in the Florida tomato fields. I don't know where Chicago tomatoes come from, probably Mexico more, but on the East Coast at least, they mostly come from Florida, at least in the winter. And so this organization that we've been working with, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, has created a program where they get retailers to agree to that they'll only buy from growers that have certain conditions, certain working conditions, including zero tolerance for slavery and trafficking. It used to be that the tomato fields were ground zero for slavery and trafficking in the United States. Now there is basically none. Zero tolerance for sexual assault or harassment. Almost every farm worker woman has experienced sexual assault. In the fields, zero tolerance for wage theft. There's a number of other conditions. And something that we saw was that the fields where the growers have signed on to the set of conditions so that they can sell to the companies like McDonald's and Burger King and Trader Joe's, et cetera, that have agreed to only buy from those growers, those fields figured out ways to protect their workers. Different kinds of ways, but whether it was testing, whether it was dedicated housing, pods, like they figured out ways to protect their workers. And elsewhere in the country, we had a crisis in agricultural work. And so we're seeing that those models of worker-driven solutions actually save lives. And so I'm hoping we'll see more of that. And then, of course, healthcare. I mean, that's been a crisis in this country since forever. And we just exposed that it turns out that not having healthcare or taking away people's healthcare in the middle of a global health crisis is deadly.
Thank you. That was quite powerful. I may know a little bit of this answer, but I don't know if you remember, we actually met a long time ago.
Yes, I do. At U of C, right?
Yes, my wife, the Rabbi Ari, led the Reform Hillel High Holy Days 1 year at the University of Chicago, and Rabbi Jacobs led the conservative, and we all went to a tashlich at Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cold, but gorgeous.
Yes, I was about 27 or 28 years old. That was
me too.
Time flies. But what prompted me to ask you or to remember that was Julie Webb, one of our wonderful congregants and a great social justice leader in the URJ, asked, what is your own story? What in your own story brings you personally, as a rabbi, as an individual, into justice work? And I mean, I know it's a long, rich history with Trua and Rabbi Human Rights, but tell us that story a little bit.
Of how I got here?
Yeah.
There's many pieces of the story, but I'll say that one piece of it for sure was when I was at JTS at the Jewish Theological Seminary. I started in 1998. JTS, if you know, if you spent time in New York, it's up in that little kind of academic world where there's Columbia and Union Theological Seminary and Manhattan School of Music and so there's a lot of universities, there's a lot of academic stuff happening right there. And it's also really in Harlem. So the academic world, all those universities are kind of in their own little bubble, but like really it's in Harlem. And Columbia, I'd gone to Columbia undergrad, and Columbia has a very long and complicated and challenging, sometimes ugly history with the neighborhood. But I had gone there undergrad, and I was a scared kid from the suburbs. So I kind of stayed where I was told to stay, right there. Like, don't go here, don't go there. Okay, I kind of followed the rules. But then by the time I got to JTS, I felt like I've been in this neighborhood now for 4 years, 5 really, because I took a year off, and I need to know what's going on in the neighborhood. And so I ended up getting involved kind of by chance with a group that was organizing tenants in Central Harlem. And so I got involved. So it was a 10-minute walk, like really 10 minutes from JTS Central Harlem back. But it felt like I was walking in, I mean, this is would be different now, but in the late 90s, it was like I was walking into a different world in both directions. So I would go to Harlem and people would say, it was like JTS, they'd be like, oh, you're going to Harlem? Are you safe? Are you sure? And I would go into Harlem and people would say, wow, you're the first Jew I've ever met who's not a slumlord, which is heartbreaking. And really, we're talking about a 10-minute walk. And I just felt like I have to bring these worlds together. And I didn't know how to do that. This was before Jewish social justice became a field. Most of the organizations, other than JCUA, which has been around since the 60s, most of the organizations you've heard of were not around in the 90s. And I just started looking and found myself pretty quickly in a chapter of Talmud about landlords and tenants. I alluded to this before, but like, when are you allowed to evict somebody? Well, you're not allowed to evict them during the winter because they're not going to be able to find a place to live, and it's cold and raining, because we're talking about not winter in Chicago, but winter in Babylonia, right? So it's going to be raining and miserable. They're not going to be able to find a place to live. You obviously can't build a house when it's pouring all the time. And you have to give them so much notice, and the landlord has to do these repairs, and the tenant does these repairs. And I realized that it was a lot of the same questions that I was hearing in Harlem in 1998. But nobody had ever told me that that was in the Talmud. And so I started thinking and writing about it, and asking what it meant to bring Jewish text deeply into conversation with contemporary life, and felt like this is where I'm going in my rabbinate.
That's great. Love that. Just for just a little interesting historical context, JCUA, Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, it was all founded by early members of our congregation. Robert Marks was the rabbi here. This is Legacy Congregation Solel, but we're now all one congregation. All the first probably 5 or 6 presidents were members of the congregation, and we still have some active involvement in
Evan,
a teaching organization.
Yes.
Yes.
Herman Edwards.
Yeah, I know. He was great. So in fact, as we get towards a conclusion, let me ask you kind of a question prompted by what you just mentioned. And I think, we were in rabbinical school, maybe you're a little bit earlier than I am, but kind of near the same period. And there was not the kind of infrastructure for Jewish social justice that there is now. I mean, I worked at the RAC for a year, but that was more on a political level and different style. What explains this sort of amazing flowering of Jewish social justice institutions? And what does that tell us about the future of the American Jewish community and how we can plug in? Because as a pulpit rabbi, I worry all the time about what synagogues are going to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now. What role do you see social justice and the amazing organizations that have been formed, what role do you see them playing with synagogues in the American Jewish future?
I think what we've learned is that there is a huge desire for a moral voice. There's a huge desire for a Judaism that is in conversation with the questions of our moment. And that most of us want to live a life that feels integrated. We don't want to compartmentalize. Like, I do my Jewish stuff on Shabbat morning in shul, and then I do my social justice stuff over here with this other organization, and I do my, my yoga over here, and my this, that, and the other thing. We don't want to live like that. We want to feel like all the parts of ourselves are integrated. And so we don't want to feel like for most of us that my Judaism is just what I eat and don't eat, and if I light candles, and whether I go what day I go to synagogue and what words I say there, right? Like that's, I mean, that not that that's not important. I'm a traditionally observant person, but we want to feel like it also is speaking to our lives and has something to say to the deep questions of our lives. And so we see that desire for integration, and that comes in every direction. So it both comes in terms of people who do feel really comfortable in synagogues and traditional Jewish settings, wanting to integrate justice into that work. I mean, Torah has grown, and like I said, we have more than 2,000 rabbis, and I don't know, we definitely have gone up at least 300 in the last few years, and not just because people graduate, also people are joining. And I think lots of synagogues are getting involved in different ways in their communities, whether it's because through their rabbi, through Torah, or through other organizations. But also we see that Jews who are maybe not involved in a synagogue at all and are never going to be involved in a synagogue are having Shabbat dinner together before they go to a protest, or doing Havdalah at the end of a protest. And by bringing that ritual aspect, because it also adds meaning. It elevates that protest and that social justice act. It makes it also a spiritual act. And so I see us as building a community where we don't have to make those distinctions. I mean, just to go back to the idea of halacha, so there's basically 4 divisions of halacha, and some of them have to do with ritual, and some of them have to do with civil law. But they're like all in the same set of volumes. It's all the same. It's not like we do our civil law Jewish study that has to sit on that side of the Beit Midrash, and the ritual stuff is on that side. It's all part of the same, it's all answering the same question of how we're supposed to live together in a way that fulfills us and supports us both physically and also spiritually.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that there used to be a sense that there was a false distinction, or I think it was a false distinction. People used to distinguish between ritual law and ethical law, and and I mean, there's a distinction, obviously, but there's no contradiction between people who take their Jewish ritual observance seriously, be that going to services on Friday, and people who take social justice seriously. In fact, I see it's often those who take, I mean, look at the people on this call, the leaders of our social justice committee, Tikkun Olam committee, are also people who are very involved in our worship. So that there's not that dichotomy. And I'm just so grateful to transition to speak here. I'm so grateful for the leadership of this Tikkun Olam committee. I mean, this is, there are some congregations, I think, where it's a very strong rabbinic-led social justice initiative. And while Rabbi Sarada and I are very strong advocates, we are really blessed with extraordinary lay leadership who guide us and inspire us and put together amazing programs and are just extraordinary activists. And I'm just so grateful for them. And in that vein, I want to turn it over to 2 of our wonderful leaders, Andy and Rich Amond, who will introduce, or I guess conclude our program, and also mention what's coming next. Rich?
Well, first of all, Andy is busy putting our grandson to bed, so she's out of the picture, and I didn't change the name. But first of all, I want to thank Rabbi Jacobs and Rabbi Evan and Rabbi Ike. This was a wonderful program. And, obviously thank Diane and Wendy Rhodes, who chair the committee, Amy Plotnick, who helped work on the planning, along with Wayne Rhodes, who's doing some of the technical stuff. We developed this as a 3-part program. First of all, why we want to do this work, which was obviously the topic tonight, and hopefully we're all motivated to continue. On April 5th, we're having a program on how to do this work, being led by Julie Weil, Julie Chiser-Weil, who grew up in Solel and has a tremendous background in organizing the faith-based community. Also need to recognize Julie Webb on the call from RAC, Illinois. So, two organizations who are really doing the work. We're in addition to Trua, who's doing the work locally, both JCUA and RAC, Illinois, are both, Macomb, Solel, Lakeside are strong partners with both of them. So on April 5th, please join us to learn how to get involved to do this work. And then I think it's April 19th, we're going to figure out exactly what we're going to do and who we're going to partner with to do it. So hopefully you can join us for all. I think Cantor Jay is going to close us out. And I'm going to put in the chat the link to the link to register for the April 5th meeting, as well as the link again to Trua. So if you want to learn more about what Trua does and how to support them, please. Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
I'd like to
Yeah.
add my thank you also for a wonderful presentation.
You know what? And I forgot to thank Vanessa. That was an oversight. I'm very
Here I
sorry.
am
I know
because,
that's what reminded me. Your picture
Right.
appeared on my
Thank you.
screen.
right. I also have a few announcements. I'm gonna put them in the chat. I also have a poll. So I'm gonna launch the poll. And just click on whatever it says there. And these are things, oh, I got the wrong thing. Well, I'll get it up. But we have a virtual Seder that there'll be more information on, and a community fireside chat Wednesday at 7:30.
All right. Well, certainly lots of great things to stay tuned for, and check out that poll results. Very cool. Folks, to close things off, we shall overcome, combined with our prayer for freedom, our prayer for surpassing the status quo, the norm, the given, and we call that Micha Mocha. So let's sing together. We shall overcome with our prayer for freedom. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. Oh, we'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai, Nika mocha nedar makodesh, O Nora Tehilo, O Seifele. We shall overcome someday.
Thank you, Cantor Jay. Beautiful. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And I look forward to seeing everyone on April 5th. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Laila Tov, Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Good night, all.
Good night.